welcome to Office Hours for the last week in March. As I said, for these end of the month sessions, we pick a specific topic and get our panel to do some show and tell, as well as answering your questions. This month, we're going to talk about data housekeeping, and I'm very grateful to Gorav and to Jason for volunteering their time to be your guides on this topic for the next hour. I'm afraid that Kalman Sweetmine is unable to join us. Kalman, I hope you feel better soon. But we are blessed in our office hours friends, and we're joined by Trish Perkins on the call today as well. Trish, no, you don't need to necessarily follow the chat questions, but we do hope you'll come and talk in a bit. So just to give you an idea of the agenda, Gorav has a very specific about archiving data. I think you're going to show us the flow and some things that you do to help with data storage, keep it clean. And Jason and Trish, between them, are going to cover some tips on data quality, on dupe prevention, and a little bit about merging dupes. As usual, if you have questions as we're talking, feel free to post them in chat and we'll pause to answer them or pick them up as we're talking if they're relevant. Since there are a lot of us on the call, I'd be grateful if you could mute your mic through the session, which I will try and do as well, because I'm sorry about the spotty audio, unless we ask you to speak and give us some more details. So, thank you. And we're up to 30 already, so welcome everybody. And again, apologies for those who didn't hear the first part of my introduction. I seem to have audio gremlins today. So, I think I'm going to turn over to Gorav, to you. And if you'd like to, well, this came out of a hub conversation, I think, didn't it, about data storage and the problems, I think, of when you start to go over your limit, particularly if you run a lot of email campaigns. And I know quite a few people were interested in how you sort of every so often did some cleanup and looked at how you could archive your campaign members. So can I hand over the presenter to you?
That sounds great. Please do, and let me know. I will share my screen. Perfect. This is there's nothing to see right now on the screen, but this started from this come up a few times in the hub about campaign members and deleting them or archiving them or how to get your storage back. And one, send out direct mail, twice a year, and it's a fairly large list, and it goes back a decade or more. And I thought, I don't want to delete that data, but it wasn't particularly high value stuff that we were reporting on. So I wanted to essentially use a tool called OpenRefine, which is a free open source tool that is really cool. It can do a lot of neat things for data files before you load them to Salesforce, or even if you export data from Salesforce, you can see some interesting trends. It's not a BI tool data, as I think you might hear it described. So I'll do a demo and kind of a summary of this process, because it has come, a few people have asked about it, and I've kind of pointed folks at it, but I've never actually kind of demoed it, how this works. So you don't need to try and take furious notes. It's covered reasonably well there, and if anyone has questions, just ping me on the hub, but goravseth.com, you can find it right there. So this, in summary, no actual real data here, and I created I don't know, 8 sample direct mail campaigns, and did a little mumbo jumbo to add all the contacts that exist to the campaigns. But basically, I take this kind of list of campaigns, and then you can imagine essentially squashing down. I left these three recent ones and squashed the rest down into a single campaign member record and in a long text area fields and the previous campaign member statuses. And so then you could do that, and then you could delete the original campaigns. Now, there might be a way to do this in Excel, but it's actually kind of tricky. I think, with some if formulas and this and that, but Refine makes it really easy, and it's a good kind of intro to how awesome this tool is. I'm getting private messages. Okay, cool. I've never seen those before. So here's a very simple report that are in a campaign that starts with direct mail, and that was the start date is before 2015. So you can see it's just got a list of I'm just going to export this report as a CSV because I can load those directly to Refine. Refine. If you just go to openrefine.org and go to the download page, it works on Windows, Mac, Linux. Just download it, and basically it runs in your browser. So there's really that's one of the things I love about it. It works fine up and running. I've got a little bit of info on how you do that, but it's really quite straightforward. And this is I was just testing it out earlier. So I'm going to go back to the main page, and I'm going to create a new project. Report file I just downloaded, and open it. And it's it's a pretty straightforward process. Give it a name. If you can, you shouldn't have to do anything on this page, but you're welcome to look at the options there. And voila, we have a project in Refine. And I'm not going to go through all the awesome things Refine does, but I will cover a number of them as part of this. Paste the link to the blog post in the. Anyone needs to see it there. But I'm just going to run through basically the steps that are listed in the kind of order of operations section. So you create a project, which basically you need to sort by the contact ID, because basically right now it's sorted by campaign name. And this is there's an option on every column where you can sort by that column. And Salesforce IDs are case sensitive, so make sure you check that box. And now you can see it's sorted by and these row numbers on the side didn't change. Hold on. That's later, but yeah, I'll go through that. That's a good question. So the data is we're in row mode here. Now, what we have to do is we have to hit reorder rows permanently, and I'm not going to go. It'll become clear as we work through this. So now we have our list of contacts, and the rows are in the right order. And I'm going to switch from row to record mode here, and it's not going to show any difference yet. Amazing things that Refine does. So basically, it takes whatever is in this first column, and every time it changes, that's a new record. And it's got this command called blank down, which is the part that I think you could replicate in edit cells blank down. And what's going to happen here, watch these numbers on the left, right, where rows was 1 through 7 before. Now all of a sudden there's just one record for rows and one record for Sean, one record for is this magic that I'm about to do in the next, well, it's actually 2 steps, because you could export this to Excel. I'm just going to concatenate, like join these campaign name and member status in Refine. You have to kind of do it in this funny way where you add column based on this column, and then I've got the formula in my blog post, but it's so much for cutting and pasting formulas in a live demo. It still doesn't like it. Well, that's what happens when you test stuff live. So there you go. No, still doesn't like it. That's too bad. It was just working this morning. So all that's going to do is concatenate these two columns together. So, but I do want that size value. Plus, so, I spelled something wrong. That is the name of the column. All right. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, and that is way easier. So then I'll just reload the file to refine. So to do that, you would just do equals that and that. So that's all I was after, is trying to get a single column with those values. So I will update my blog. And then I'm going to create a new project because and it will have the column in it already. So like I said, it's a little some stuff that's kind of simple in Excel, but what it does do is pretty awesome. So so we'll sort it as case sensitive, and then reorder the rows, and then down. And now we've got the this column already. And now this is what this record mode lets you do. They've got a command already that basically lets you join multi-valued cells. And now it knows all of the rows for rows. It's treating it as a single record. So with that one command, I want to join it by a semicolon, because I like semicolons. It's created this one field that's got all of the campaign member status values for Sean, and they all have the same number of campaigns in this case, but it makes that part really easy. And then basically all that's left is to remove these blank rows, because you don't need them anymore. They have this tool called facets, and facets are really neat. So sorry, I want to facet by blank. So if I facet this by blank, I can say just show these rows, remove all matching rows. And so remove that facet, and what we're left with is just the contacts. We've got their ID, and we've got this concatenated status column. And then you can basically create a new campaign, use that ID, and load campaign member records for all of the contacts. So I did that already previously when I was setting this up. So in any of these records, you can see, I originally loaded it for all. That's a fairly straightforward data load. I can certainly add some more info on how you do that, but I'll at least demonstrate it here. So you would, there's one additional optional step that also requires, I'm not going to do that here, but I've got the formula in my blog post. So now I'm just going to show you how you export this data. I'm going to export it as comma separated value as well. To load data to Salesforce, I'm just going to add a little more space for each column. All you need to add is the campaign ID for your new campaign, which in this case is the that. So this is my consolidated. So if I take that campaign ID, paste it into the file, you could essentially load this very easily to create a campaign member record. And you've got your contact ID and your campaign ID. And then you have to create a custom, there's no standard long text area field on campaign numbers that you can write to. So you have to create, store all this concatenated prior history. But basically, once you've done that, you can delete all of the no longer used campaign member records. The only thing is, I wouldn't suggest deleting the original campaigns themselves. So if you wanted to repair an opportunity, I think it's worth keeping the campaigns, and then you just have the opportunities corrected campaigns. It's almost not, it's totally negligible on the data storage side. Live demo of using OpenRefine to essentially archive historical records. If you really wanted to, you could recreate. If someone decided next year that you needed all these records back, you could actually recreate them from this. You just, instead of joining multi-valued cells, you would take this and you would split multi-valued cells based on a semicolon, right? And now instead of blanking down, you would do fill down. And then all of a sudden, you would actually fill out this, and you could essentially you'd have to create new campaigns for each of those, and you could basically rebuild that data anytime you wanted, if for some reason someone decided that was necessary. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing with the little hiccup via programmer, which I'm not in terms of writing things properly, but I'm not sure why that suddenly decided to break on me when it worked this morning. So, and I'm happy to, I'll take a look at questions and thorough demo of Refine, but I would really, it's a pretty in-depth, there's a book. I have no connection to this book. It's like $10 or something on Amazon, and it's going to do a much better job than I'm going to have. Pretty good documentation. So I highly suggest just downloading some data and playing around with it to see what it does. But reading that book, it's a short read. It's by far the best way to get. I saw someone earlier had a question about security. This is all running in your browser. It's not a cloud product at all. It's literally just on your machine. So the data doesn't go anywhere. There is actually a cloud version that you can purchase. The same as it's running. It's the same as looking at it in Excel. It's running directly on your machine. And so I'd say maybe at this point, Caroline, what do you think? Open to questions or move to Jason and do questions at the end?
I think there are a few questions just where we are. What I was wondering, Gorav, is how often do you do this process, or what makes you decide it's worth tidying up like this?
Right. We actually have only done it once, and that was about 2 years ago because we based it at the time. And one big factor in it was that we were hitting our data storage limit. So that was a motivating factor. And then just looking at kind of what the number of records that we have and the number of records that would be, how a worthwhile exercise. But certainly for people who send email a lot, or where you've got a lot of data that you could accumulating, it's a way of essentially archiving it in a folder. So I would say, it's not something I do frequently. I can't imagine doing it, you could do it, every couple of years, but I would say, probably something you might do like every 5 years for this specific campaigns, multiple times a month that are going to 10, a large volume of folks. You might have something that you can do every quarter. So I'd say it depends on the volume. And it would certainly work for any object that cites a lot. and it's this nature of like one contact has n number of campaign member records, and how do we just kind of squeeze that into one record? So similarly, if you have, I can't think of use cases for this, like in terms of the standard objects, but I could imagine with some custom objects, you might have some opportunities there. I mean, maybe with activities, you could do something that would be useful. But Salesforce does that. Interesting.
Yes, Sandy, you asked the question about using it for more than campaigns. Did you have anything in mind, Sandy Hunter?
Hey, can you guys hear me? Hello. Hi. Yeah, we're kind of using exact target, and it's not capturing it in a campaign. It's individual email history. And that's really eating up all of our data. So that's where I want to target.
I've used them before, and yeah, if you're storing like those individual results, we used to just delete them because I didn't have this approach at the time. But you could absolutely, that's a similar thing where you've got, whether they clicked it, whether they opened it, so on and so forth. They clicked, opened, clicked, all in one record. And if you, if you needed to see that data, you could. But it's certainly worth considering whether it's worth keeping it all or just deleting. This can be a way to allow you to have that data. You can't report it on it in exactly the same way that you would if you had individual records. So there's certainly considerations, but it's kind of a way of hoarding data, I guess. So it's a way of holding onto it without deleting it, which I'm always very hesitant to.
Thank you.
Sure.
This is an interesting thing to follow, just maybe for a couple of minutes. This idea that you preserve things and archive them in some way rather than deleting them, which I think is how most people would think that they would do it. I wonder if have you ever used reporting snapshots to do a similar sort of idea, or has anyone ever consolidated data into kind of other sorts of summaries as a way of preserving information without deleting it?
That's a really interesting point, and I think oftentimes you're kind of looking at aggregate data in terms of how many people, oftentimes whatnot, but you could even smash all that down into kind of monthly trends, so that A, your reporting would run much faster, and then B, you don't really need the row level data. You could just say, okay, 12%, March 2016 went up to 25%, and stuff like that. So there's always trade-offs, and but it would let you see some of that aggregate. Analytic snapshots primarily for pipeline history reporting, because you can't ever see what your pipeline was 2 years ago. You can only see what it is now. So I use snapshots for that. Define is a tool a colleague of mine here showed to me a few years ago, and it can do stuff with XML files. It can do some really interesting stuff. It's not perfect, but it's a nice open source tool. So I'm really happy.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we've covered. Bryn asked if what you've been talking about, Gorav, is all in your blog post.
I think it probably doesn't have a ton of details, but if you have any questions, if you run into any issues, you can hit me on the hub or Twitter, and I can try and help you out with them. fine as well. It can do so much more interesting stuff. This is kind of a funny use case for it, even in a way, but it's a really cool tool.
All right, let's move the conversation on a little bit to I called this session Data Housekeeping deliberately to make the topic a little wider. I think when most people think about data housekeeping, they probably also think about issues to do with data quality and probably also about duplicate records. So I'm not sure whether I should go to Trish or Jason first. You can decide. But I think let's take the conversation a little bit into the whole idea of data housekeeping being about clean data. So maybe Trish, do you have any tips and tricks you recommend for kind of quality of data and keeping your records complete or consistent?
Okay. I tend to use, and I don't have a demo together. Thanks, Gorav, but I haven't.
It's all right, Trish. We only gave you
any kind of demo here.
I know we only gave you 30 minutes warning. It's fine.
So one of the things that I do with all of my clients is to try to set up a set of filters in Persona. So that's a very easy kind of filter that you can set up. So you don't need to run an official report. You don't need need a report for that. You just set up the filters. So for instance, show me all the records where the birth date is incomplete or empty. Or I had a case this last week where it's like some of them that were in the future or that were after dates where these people could not be in college. And so I set up a filter that just said, show me all the records where the birth date is before 1945 and after 2010. And then anything I think you can set up and then run regularly. If you've got people entering data on a regular basis, then you're going to want to once a week or once a month run your filters and then get back to your folks and say, looks like we're kind of falling off on the birth date entry or the phone number entry, or you're putting your not in the one that you said is your preferred phone or some kind of thing. So that's pretty much what I do. I rely on set up the filters and also set up the page layout. So I only get the pages. I only get the fields on the page that I'm interested in tracking, and then I only get the fields where the data is missing or weird. And then I get that information to the people that need to have it. So I'm open for other kinds of questions, but that's pretty much what I do for the data quality stuff. Right, you can run this. Brian, you can run data exception reports exactly as Persona filters. In fact, they call them that. So that is precisely what you can do. So, is there any other questions? Great. Yes, I forgot that, Caroline. I'm glad you mentioned it. Yes.
Yes, I don't know whether Alison let us on the call that she was leading the group at the sprint where we were talking about this, and we started building some data exception reports, and then got rather complicated rather quickly in terms of preferred emails and phones, but we'll keep working on it.
Well, and for those that don't have ready made, there's a question from Ben about where is the page layout? Are you talking about the page layout in Asona? Yeah, it's called set column. You click on the, and then that is to say in Asona. You click on that, and you get a choice between all records or tabular layout or reports. You want to go with the tabular layout, and then you click the set columns, and that's where you decide which columns you want to see in your exception report. Exactly, and you can also save that tabular layout. You can save all of it.
We might come back to this. I'm just trying to decide which Asana org I don't mind sharing. I can come back and show you something in a few minutes. So we could come back to this. Jason, do you want to?
Great.
What are some of your favorite data quality things, and can you take us a little bit into maybe a bit of a conversation about dupes and dupe prevention?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, I just want to mention one other app that I started to think about it, related to managing field usage and like the data in fields. So there's a great free app exchange app called Field Trip that again, I wish I had a demo for it, but basically the way it works, you install the app, you pick your object, and you can tell it to run on all records on that object, so all accounts or any custom objects of your choosing. And what it's going to do is it's going to run through all the fields for that particular object and tell you for each field how many records have that field, like have a value in that field. So if you have a lot of custom fields, you can tell, we created at some point a custom birth date field for some reason. Maybe they thought that there wasn't one already, or you know what I mean, like something like that. But it's only used 5% of the time. We should probably just delete this field. And so it just gives you like a little custom report that will tell you every single usage of all the feed data, because you can run through quickly and just say, no one's ever and this is a thing I see all the time. There are fields that have literally never had a value inserted into them. Someone just creates a field and then that's it. So the question is, does Field Trip show last modified dates on these fields? So it's on contact basis. So it unfortunately it can't really show you last modified, and it also, like, that's not something that can be tracked unless field history was already set up for those fields in advance. Otherwise, there would be no last modified date to show for that, how often it's utilized, if not like when it was last utilized. There are a couple caveats I think that are worth pointing out. It's basically useless for checkbox fields, because for checkbox, both checked and unchecked are a value. So as far as it's concerned, those are used 100%. And formula fields. I mean, there's no way it could return anything meaningful there, right? Because it doesn't know what to expect from the formula. But those caveats aside, it's a great free tool. It's easy to use. You can't break anything when you're, just trying to run a field trip report. All it's doing is querying stuff and displaying it. It's not modifying anything. it's up to you to go and delete the fields afterwards. So it's risk-free, and again, it's free. So there's really no reason not to give it a try if you want to try to clean up some of those old fields. So aside from that, and that just came up because of what we were talking about before, and it just made me think of it. So the main thing I wanted to talk about was just briefly into the built-in Salesforce duplicate management, which I think a lot of people either don't use or are afraid to use because they're not sure how it works. And it can be effective if used correctly. And I don't know how much other information we want to get into. Yeah, I was going to ask if I should show my screen here or if we should just talk about it really quick. Because I don't want to eat up all the time if we have more stuff to talk about.
I think it's always great to see something, Jason. So.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So there are two parts to the Salesforce data.com duplicate management. There is the duplicate rules and the matching rules. And the way this works is the matching rule specifies how we consider something a duplicate. And so you can see I've created a couple custom ones here that I've just cloned off of the MPSP rule that comes in, which is just based on a match of first name, last name, and personal email. So I cloned that, and then I did another one that's actually on work email. I just forgot to update the description. So I'm going to click on this work email one. Yes, it does work on Classic. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm trying to force myself to work in Lightning as much as possible. So I'm attempting to get through this entirely in Lightning, but all of this works in Classic as well. And so if you're in Classic, the easiest way to find it would just be in your quick find, just search like duplicate, and it'll bring you to the data.com area, wherever it's located. So this matching rule that I've created, you can see I'm basically saying my criteria is the first name has to match the first name of the other contact, and it has what's called fuzzy matching on the first name. So there's a set of rules built into Salesforce that they understand that it's a name field, and so with the fuzzy matching, they'll attempt to make matches to like approximation. Generally, that's a good idea for first names. It's not as good of an idea for last names, but you could, like there is a fuzzy last name option if you're feeling confident that people are going to mistype last names. There are also, I believe, fuzzy matching rules for street info. Yeah, so there's street, city, state. And I know Salesforce has somewhere tucked away how it actually performs that fuzzy matching in a help document, but I'm not sure offhand where that is. If anyone knows where that is and wants to link to it, that'd be fantastic. So you can see the other side of this is you can also tell it to match blanks. I'm not sure what scenarios you would use that for, but it's nice to have that option. So what that would be is if a contact has a blank first name, then this contact would match to that the same as if they had the same first name. You can also see we can add filter logic here. Does matching work when importing from a list? Yeah, so when you say importing from a list, I mean, do you mean like a spreadsheet, or like if you're just doing a standard data import through like either the import wizard or data loader? Or demand tools? Yeah, so that's the other part that I want to get to in this, and this is where this can actually cause you a fair bit of frustration. So it will work through any kind of import, and that's not always a good thing. So basically, this is how you specify what records it's going to consider matches. So once you do this, the other part of it is the duplicate rule. And this is what it does when it finds those matches, basically. So I've created a couple here. We have the MPSP work email one. This is what I'm working off of. And so the way this works is, so if I were to edit this, maybe it'll make the UI a little bit easier to work with. there are a couple of pieces to this, right? So the first thing is sharing rules. You can say that it'll only look for matches within the set of records that that user has access to. So if you're enforcing, you know, like private record access, then they would only see, like it would only check matching against the contacts or whatever type of record that the person can access. You can also bypass sharing rules so that it will look in your whole database, regardless if that person has access to this or not. And that can cause a problem as well, because it might then be matching against a contact that that person can't even see or edit. So really they can't fix that, right? Because they know it's a match, but they don't know against what. So you just want to be careful when you're using your sharing rules. The other part of this is the actions, and this is where you can get into trouble with your any kind of integration, or if you're doing a data import through demand tools or any other tool. So there are a couple of options here. First off, you can say block, and this will just completely stop them. Like if it's a duplicate, they're stopped dead in their tracks until they go and edit that other record instead. But if you say allow, then you have two levels of control. You can alert, and if you say alert, then what they're going to get is sort of a pop-up when they go to save that record. It says, well, it says whatever you tell it to say here, and it will show them what those potential duplicate records are. If it's allow, they can bypass this alert. However, if you're using an import tool or an integration, this alert will stop that import dead in its tracks. So for a data importer, or like if you have some sort of form builder that's integrated with Salesforce, allow with alert set is significant as a block. You're just not getting through that. So that's definitely something to be aware of, because I've seen people use this and all of a sudden they're like, how come, you know, our online, you know, lead form or whatever suddenly isn't getting any new data coming in? And it's because this allow won't let it come through. So you want to be careful with your alerts. It definitely can cause you grief. And the way I recommend getting around that is you have these conditions down here. Yeah, okay, so someone mentioned Classy, and Classy has built code that works with this alert. So it is possible. I'm not going to get into the details of how it's possible, because right now I'd say Classy is in the minority. Most systems are going to come to a halt if you have this alert set. So the way I recommend working around that is you set your conditions. If you have some sort of third-party web form app integrated, usually those are integrated through a specific user. So one condition you could do would just say, like, the contact created by user is exempt. So say that user connected to that web form is exempt from the alert rule, and then they're allowed to get their web form submissions through. And then all the other users, they're just entering contacts the old-fashioned way, will see this alert and will be able to use it properly. Now, obviously, that creates its own set of problems, because then everything coming through the web is just going to be able to create duplicates to its heart's content. And that's where I recommend you create maybe two sets of your duplicate rules, one with an alert that excludes that web form user, or your data import user, usually some sort of system admin, right? And then another set of rules that applies just to that user that has alert turned off and is set to only report. And that way you can actually run a report on duplicates. And so it's retroactive, right? You have to go back and clean up the work afterwards, but at least they're not just set, like they're not going to slip through the cracks. And yeah, Michael, that is a good thing to keep in mind. You are set to a limit of 5 duplicate rules per object. So you can't go nuts and like customize the way you check for contact 1,000 different ways. You're going to hit that wall pretty quick. But this at least makes sure that you're not going to break your forms, but you're still going to be able to audit your duplicates to some extent. And how far do we want to go down the duplicate management here? Because I have a report set up that we can talk about. again, I want to make sure we save time for questions and everything else. So I guess, Caroline, just let me know if I should keep going.
Well, we've had one request. We've had one request to see the report, so there you go.
Okay. Okay. So, and I want to ask about this because this isn't something I'm sure about. To my knowledge, the only way to get a duplicate report is to create a new report type. I don't believe the reports come standard. Yeah, so actually for this demo, I had to go in and look up report type. And if anyone's ever created a report type, it's the same as any other type of report. The duplicate is just a sub-object of whatever record you're working off of. So if I were to do what I just did earlier again, I'm going to say new custom report, and I want a contact duplicate report. So the first thing I will select is contacts. We give it a name, a description, and then you just choose what report type folder you're going to store it in. For this, I would think administrative reports would make sense. Hit next. You want to make sure it's deployed so that other people besides you can get access to it. And so contacts is listed as my primary. We just simply choose a secondary object, and you're going to go through the list until you find duplicate record items. We only want to see those contacts that have a duplicate record item. So we say each contact A record must have at least one related B duplicate record item. And then you just save this report. It's good to go. Now, when you do a new, wrong tab. When you do a new report now, you can search for that report. So if I say dupe, see now the one I created before and the one I created second just now. They're both the same report. I follow the same exact set of steps. And so at this point, it works like any other report. So I'm just going to jump into the report I created. Duplicate records are like the way they're connected. It's an object just like anything else. They just have really clunky names. So you can see I've grouped by this sort of duplicate record set name. And then every time it finds a dupe, it puts it into either a whole new set, or if it's in this if it matches existing dupe records, it's just going to add like a fourth to this. So if I were to create a new contact right now using the parameters I put forth of just first name, last name, and work email, it will add a fourth item to that record set. Come on, Lightning, work with me.
Unfortunately, it's why you still have to be brave about these things at the moment, about using Lightning.
Right. Yeah, it's great for a lot of things, but it's definitely a learning curve with Lightning. Okay, so I just created another JSON cook with that same work email address. And so if I refresh this now, and so see now we have a fourth entry here on this duplicate record set report. And what's useful with these is, since this is an object with a layout, like I can actually, I can click on that duplicate record set and then see all the duplicate records below it as related items. And you can kind of click into them. You can see when this was created, so the automated process. So it'll tell you when this was marked as a dupe, basically. And then you can further click into the JSON cook record. What I don't think you can do, and again, someone please let me know if I'm wrong about this, I don't believe there's actually any merge process built into this. So there's no merge button that exists right now. So you'd have to go into like the MPSP contact merge tool or some other system to merge these. Or you can manually merge and delete. But that would definitely be a plus, right? If there was just something on this page layout that was, you could just click it and say, merge all these down to one. Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? I wonder though, if you were using something like demand tools, if you could have a criteria that you're looking for duplicate contacts where a duplicate record set exists. or a duplicate record item exists. Wonder if anyone's tried that.
Yeah, you almost certainly could, right? Yeah. I would think that would work.
And I was just going to, and I was just going to say, for this, there was a question about this on office hours last week, because somebody wanted to show which rule was being used when a duplicate item was found, and the answer is posted in the Hub office hours chatter group. It's Susan Sparks went and did the research. So if you go and look in the chatter group, she's got the answer. There was Edith had quite an interesting question, which kind of takes us in a slightly different direction. But Edith, you'd asked to prevent wrongly formatted data entry. Can you set up a filter on each field within an object? Any thoughts, anyone on the panel? And yeah, Gorav, I figured out it was a problem with my headset rather than the connection, so that's why I sound clearer now.
Ah,
wonderful.
Wonderful. So hopefully that means the recording will sound good.
Yes, I hope so, because you all sound brilliant now, because you're on my speakers. So yeah, any thoughts? That's an interesting question. How might you prevent, this is, I suppose, going back even further from duplicate prevention, how could you prevent mistakes in data formatting? Anyway.
So the only thing I could think of, like, I don't think you could do it on every single field, but I mean, you could set up validation rules on the fields that are prone to poorly entered data. And I mean, what would you do? I guess you could set up like a regular expression, a regex validation rule to control that. So it would be a lot of work, and you'd really want it to be for a specific set of fields, because otherwise, one, you'd hit your validation limit, and two, I could see that making data entry almost impossible if you really ran away with it.
Yeah, there's a nice, well, it's kind of an intro session on validation rules, but it's run for a few years at Dreamforce. I can find the link to that. I was on it once. Yeah, there's a regular expression validation rule could certainly work, but and also Salesforce for like email fields, they provide validation to ensure that it's formatted.
Right.
That's probably the only field type that they really do that for, I think. So I guess it would depend on the specific field type and what you could control. But if like you're only in the United States, well, you could turn on state and country pick lists, or you could certainly ensure that zip codes are formatted as zip +4, or if there was a compelling use case for that, it wouldn't drive your users crazy.
Also, I think I was once in a webinar with Francis Scudeleri, who is my data guru on validation rules, and he suggested that you may want to set up that formula so that the system administrator is exempt, because every time, if you've got one of those validation rules, you either have to deactivate them all so that you can test stuff, or if you set the validation rule up so that the system administrator is exempt, then the system administrator can actually test stuff. So that was Francis' suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. And it also makes things like bulk data imports a lot easier too, because otherwise your validation rule is just going to tear that data import apart.
But I think
exactly.
Like you said, and I think like you said, Gorav, I mean, as far as possible, trying to use pick lists. I know it doesn't necessarily work for lots of addresses and things, but where you can use pick lists values so people are selecting the answers, perhaps rather than having to just type them, that's helpful.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, right. Keep an eye on org affiliation extra entries creation. Have you been the victim of a checkbox that has been auto-creating affiliations, Bryn? That's, there's also some useful Bill Florio has been posting a series of chat links about a tool called Dupe Blocker. Is that the one that Demand Tools makes? Are they as well, CRM Fusion? Yeah.
Yeah, we use that. It's nice.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do like Dupe Blocker also, and I don't mean to imply that I think that the Salesforce solution is the only one or even the best by any means. I just I think it's underutilized, so it's important to, you know, it's good for people to at least know it's out there and how you use it.
Yeah, I think the alert functionality is really nice, just because Dupe Blocker, for example, it won't. I guess you can block from saving, but I don't think it's quite as nice in terms of how it integrates with the page. And I'm guessing, I actually haven't seen what the alerts look like in Lightning, but I'm guessing they're integrated fairly nicely into Lightning, where I think, if I recall correctly, the alerts from Dupe Blocker, they just don't have as much access to the page. So you either have to put a big Visualforce area or something like that. We actually don't use we don't block them. We just use them to catch.
So we have. Just see if I can get through Lightning quick enough to show you what that looks like, because I should have another rule set up that will. Give us a demonstration of that. I don't think I turned it off before this. Okay, yeah, so here it is. So it has your custom message, and then it actually gives you like contact cards of the ones it thinks are dupes. So it would repeat this in a scrollable block for as many as there are.
That's really nice.
Yeah, so it's definitely a nicer interface.
Oh, that's very nice. Yes, thank you for showing us that, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple of minutes left, and I realize this is a huge topic. We could go on for several more hours, couldn't we? Because we haven't really talked about dupe merging at all. However, I do think, maybe even Jason, you were on that previous session. There is a recording of a session that we did specifically on duplicate management sometime last year on Office Hours, and it's definitely a topic we'll need to repeat. Anything else? Did we miss any questions? Has anyone got going back to where we were before, or questions about Apsona? Thank you. No. Okay. Anything just from the panel, without opening another whole box of
I was going to do a little bit of like refined deep dive for someone who asked it. So if there's other folks who want it, I'm just going to go out there and put my Skype ID in the chat. So you can just add me on Skype. I'm going to do it right after this call. So anyone's welcome to join in it'll just be short, like 15 minutes or so, but show a few things.
Do you want to stay on this session, Gorav?
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually.
I'm very happy. So anyone who would like to stay on this session, and that's I have the time. I can keep it open. I'll put myself on mute. So if you'd like to see a little more open refine, everybody, you're very welcome to stay. But this is now the end of the formal bit of Office Hours. Thank you very much indeed, Gorav and Jason. Thank you, Trish, for having your arm twisted virtually at the last minute. We have recorded the session. Thank you for the great questions. And Office Hours will be back with a general Q&A next week. But as I say, if any of you would like to hang on the line, I believe we're going to get a little more open refine, and I'll pass presenter over to you, Gorav. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely weekend if you're not staying with us.
All right. Well,
thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody. So I will take presenter over again. I'm going to use a different data set. I'll do a little bit maybe with the campaign one, but some of the more interesting stuff, you kind of need some more interesting data to work with. It's a pretty small set. So OpenRefine provides some sample data sets you can use to try it out. So I'll do one of those in a second. But there were some questions about about facets, and facets are really cool, and they lead into other stuff. But in here you can see they come with some standard facets. The text facet is very clear. It just shows every how much each value exists, and that you can do some fun stuff with that. If you click on that choices, you can actually cut and paste those out into like another, into Excel or something if you wanted to. But it lets you, with facets is where you get into clustering, which is basically cleaning up ugly data, and it gives you a few different methods, and I don't know the details about these, but here, it's finding similar ones. So you say, well, actually, yeah, these should both be pat, then you can say merge select cluster. So it's kind of I use this sometimes when we're getting data from we're getting messy data. I can clean up, country names. You can clean up all kinds of stuff pretty quickly. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can see what's good data, what's bad data. Pick list values, for example, like if you want to, if you have any pick lists with hyphens in them, just don't, but we do. And sometimes you get the little dash, and sometimes you get the big dash. There's a lot of fun stuff with that. So I'm just going to pull down a random data set. This isn't too big. If you have really large data sets, you actually have to, they have instructions for it, but you might actually have to allocate additional memory to refine to open it. Well, hey, everything's going down right now, right? Let's see if we can find any of these data sets. Hey, look at that. I have no idea what this is, but let me download it, and then I'll open it up in Refine. So I'm going to create a new project, which go create project, choose file. It works, and like I said, it can do all kinds of files, which is nice. You can even get stuff from the web. There's some really interesting stuff that people do with it, but this looks good. So I've never seen this data set. I have no idea what's in it, but it's opened up. So let's just facet on this field, committee name, and we'll see all the values in here. And if, you can actually just scroll through and see them. But you can also, if you hit cluster, it'll start to look and see what's similar. So you say, okay, maybe these are the same again, and it's got some really cool stuff. Browse this cluster, you can actually just see those values. I mean, it's a fun tool. But the clustering and the kind of the merging is, let's say we actually just want to call this rig 2. Okay, I'll say, yeah, let's just do that. So that can be a very helpful tool. What else can you do with Refine? Gosh. You can so here we've got a date field, so you can do a timeline facet, and that makes interesting. That does not seem right. It must not have come in as a date field. So there's a way to God, it's been a long time. No, that's you have to do, and there's a way to force the cells to like a specific type, but I honestly don't recall because I don't use it that much. So I apologize, but yeah, I think these didn't come through as date fields, which is why I couldn't do a date facet, and I could probably set that when I import it. But there is a way to force the cells to. Oh, here we go. Yeah, transform to date. So that should, yeah, now we've got start date and end date. So so the transforms is also a nice, you can clean up some cases. There's a whole, it's actually got like its own programming language. I can show that really quickly. So when I was going to do when you go into transform, you basically can, it's got its own language, and then if you know either of these two languages, you can write your own functions to do stuff that you can't do just kind of with what they provide in the UI. And on their site they go through, but they've got the basic stuff you would expect. So now I can do a timeline facet, and it'll actually show, okay, here's the data, and you can see exactly how many values you have. And if you only want to see the ones from this time, then boom, there you go. But it can also, you generally when you're working with messy data like they talk about like getting the shape of the data first. So you kind of you start looking at, you know, does this stuff look right at the top level? And if it doesn't, you can easily dive in to see what's going on in that area. With really large data sets, you might have, you know, you might not be able to do certain types of facets because it'll, you know, blow stuff out. But another thing you can also do is like these are dependent, right? So if I just want to say, okay, wow, there's 500 of these, I just want to look at those. I can just click on that, and now both these facets reflect that I'm just looking at these 510 records. And you can also say, I just want those and that and this. And now I can say, oh wow, yeah, all of those are in here, you know. Or if I just want to say, okay, what's going on with, why are there so many records in this area? You know, maybe I'd say, okay, I just want to see these agency ones, and maybe no. Anyway, so if we kept digging it, we could probably maybe figure out why there's this huge spike here. What's going on, you know. I don't even know what this data represents, so it's kind of hard to do that. But that's I mean, most of what you're going to do is in facets and transforms, so edit cell transform. What I showed earlier, I can go back into that project real quick because I'll talk a little more about row mode versus record mode, because that's something that I don't know how you could, it enables some pretty interesting stuff, and I'm not sure how you could replicate it in other programs. But basically, like I said, refine, when you're in row mode, each row is its own record. But if you switch to record mode, it takes whatever is in this first column, and wherever it's changes is a new record. And what that means is all of the rows underneath it, where if these were grouped into a record, which I'll do in a sec, you can do stuff with just those rows, like I did with concatenating stuff. So I'll kind of run through what I did just to the row versus record point. So you have to sort. It has to be in the first column. You can't, and that's just how it works. You sort by it. You always have to reorder rows per row. Oh, this isn't going to work because it's the already cleaned up one. But one nice thing about Refine is it's actually got really good undo. So I can actually just go right back to the beginning if I want. And you can even, this is kind of advanced, but if there's something that you want to do to the same data set repeatedly, you can actually, everything it's doing is JSON. And so you could actually just copy and paste this and save it in a file, and then open the file up again, open the next month's file up and just paste that in. And with the apply function, you can just do all the same stuff without clicking anything. So I could have actually done that whole demo by pasting a bunch of JSON, but I don't think that would have been helpful. I'll go back to here, and then I'm just going to wrap this up in a minute with any specific questions. So here, when I created the project, I sorted and reordered the rows. And then when I do the blank down, you can see all of a sudden these are all considered one row. So now that's what let me do this join multi-valued cells. And in this case, because they all have 5 records, it doesn't seem perhaps quite as amazing. But I think that would be pretty challenging to do in Excel. I'm sure you could figure it out. There's like array formulas and stuff that I know very little about. But I've got a few kind of random blog posts about Refine out there. And a lot of them have to do with kind of like dealing with multi-selects. And it's very easy to break them apart or join them together. And also, like I said, just see what's happening in your data. So if anyone has specific questions, just open up your mic and I can try to answer it. Otherwise, hopefully that was helpful. Hold on, what's this? Cool. Well, check it out. It's a good tool, and like I said, there's a $10 book that will show you much more and explain much better than what I'm capable of. I use it, every couple of months, but I'm always happy to kind of to use it because it's a cool tool.
I mean, you're right, Gorav, because I've been sort of partly listening in. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of that stuff that you could do with Excel, pivot tables, and that sort of thing. But I mean, if nothing else, this is just so much quicker, isn't it? Because the data is sort of all there and online, and it's not like you're having to download it and, you know, open up a document and transform it, and you can.
Yeah, like if you wanted to just get like the unique first, you know, unique values for some column. I mean, if you had 1 million rows, this wouldn't work very well without a lot of memory. But you can see right there, you know, here's your values. You can absolutely do that in 1 million ways, but it makes it so easy. You're like, not just what the values are, but what the counts are. And that comes in with multi-selects a lot, because in Salesforce, you can't do that with native Salesforce reporting. But if you know, and you can do it in Excel, but it's pivot table-y stuff. If you just dump it into here and do a facet on it, you have to split the multi-select by semicolon and do a facet on it. You've got your counts right there. It can be a nice tool for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I once had to do that. I was looking when you did the concatenated status. I had to do that for an organization, and my husband ended up writing me an org script that you could kind of run things through. And I mean, it's great and it works fantastically, but I'm just looking at this going, oh my God, I could just do it.
Yeah, it's cool. And I fixed it. It was totally a copy paste issue. That's what set me down on the
okay.
The status. It's like the whatever blog engine I used does weird stuff.
Oh,
now
yeah.
I've updated it and now it works just fine. So but it is easier to, you know, but it's this thing right here can be really cool. So
yeah, again, it's a huge time saver. It's great. Well, there are still there've been a few who've stuck with us to watch this through. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. It's always a pleasure.